Hello, beautiful. My name is Claudine Francois with In Good Clean Taste, and I am so excited about today's topic, how to make self-care a reality. And I think this topic is so critical for us women because so many of us are running full throttle all the time, and we tend to not be able to take time for ourselves to regroup, to reset, and let our bodies regenerate. Am I right? So if you're joining me today live, please put a little hi or emoji in the comments so I can see who you are. And if you're watching on the replay, please put hashtag replay. It's always good for me to know what topics are resonating so I can do more of them. So today's live is basically going to be broken into 4 different sections. It's going to be what is self-care, why is it important, why is taking a time out so hard for ourselves, and then how to actually make it happen. So hang out with me till the end because the good stuff is coming up. But I think it's really important to start with the basics, right? Again, if you're joining me live, oh, hi, Randia. How are you? So good to see you. I love answering questions too. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. If you're watching this on the replay, you can still ask questions and I will check them later. So let's start with what is self-care. Now, self-care can mean anything, right? It can be anything that you enjoy doing that allows you to give yourself a break, right? So one thing that I find that's particularly useful is every morning giving myself 20 minutes in the morning to do what I call the morning practice. Now, as I got more appreciative of this practice, once I started to see how much better I showed up for myself and for everyone else around me on the days that I did my morning practice, I actually have extended my morning practice. It could be 20 minutes, it could be 30 minutes, it could be an hour, it could be whatever you have, but giving yourself that time in the morning sets you up for the day in that you tend to be more patient, you tend to be more focused, you tend to be more efficient, which means you can get more things done, right? Because I know you go-getters out there are just all about checking things off your to-do list. So if you want to be more effective and have it done in a calmer way, in a way that it's pleasurable to you versus stressful, then having that morning practice, hi Nicola, good to see you. Having that morning practice really sets you up well for the day. Now, I've talked about morning practice before, but I'll just give you some of the key things that I find are really helpful. One is doing a morning meditation. And when I started meditation, I started at 3 minutes, right? It's hard to start something new. And especially when you're trying to quote unquote focus to do a meditation, sometimes it's just better to start with less and then work your way up. So meditation, doing some inspirational reading, something that really gets you motivated for the day, doing some affirmations, and doing some journaling. I love to do gratitude journaling. I feel like that really puts me in a positive frame of mind to think about all the wonderful things I have in my life that I am grateful for. And I don't know, it just creates a whole atmosphere of gratitude throughout my day. And then during the day, I'm thinking about, I'm noticing things to be grateful for the next day in my gratitude journal. And then doing some kind of movement, whether it's taking a walk or doing some light stretching. Really, you can do whatever you want, whatever makes you feel good, but setting some time up for yourself every morning is so critical to your overall well-being. And it signals to your brain that you are worth taking that time for yourself, right? Now, a lot of us have been told over our lives that we aren't good enough or that we aren't enough of something. Telling ourselves now that we are good enough, that we do deserve 20 minutes in the morning is super critical to our overall mental well-being. So some other examples of self-care, yoga is fantastic. I love my yoga practice. I can't get enough of it. It's not only a physical practice, because some people do it specifically for exercise. For me, it's a mental practice because it really gets me out of my head and I get to, reset, regroup, and just feel so amazing after. People talk about that yoga glow. It's true because you're able to get out of your head. And for those of us whose heads are constantly, our brains are constantly moving, the little hamster wheel going on there, having that time to get out of your head is wonderful. So I can't say enough about yoga. Bubble baths are great in the evenings, especially as part of an evening routine. Getting a massage, getting a pedicure, getting a facial, doing anything you love, whether it's sitting in the hot tub, going for a walk, going for a hike, sewing, gardening, reading, as long as it's something you enjoy doing, give yourself the time and space to do it. Now, just taking that 20 minutes or so per day really sets you up for physical and mental well-being. So that's the first part, right? What is self-care? That's what it is. Now, why is it important? I'm going to talk about, there are so many reasons it's important, right? I'm going to talk about two big ones that I see in my clients all the time. And that is, the first one is stress. Now, if you've been around me a while, you have heard me talk about stress. You've heard about my story where I spent 20 years in a high stress corporate environment and it ate away at me from the inside out. I'm actually going to be doing another live later today where I talk more about my personal struggle. But stress overall, it creates that fight or flight response in us, right? The stress response is created to allow us to run away from whatever danger was chasing us back in the times when we were running away, physically running away from something that was chasing us. The problem is all the stress that we're dealing with now is usually stress that we've created in our minds. It's, a deadline stress or some kind of work related stress. We're not actually having to run away from something, physically run away, right? So that stress response where it's pumping cortisol and adrenaline into our systems and creating the stress response is actually not helping us. It's harming us, because when we are in that stress state a lot, which most of us are, it's creating this feedback loop in our bodies. And there are a few problems with that. One is that we have all these chemicals, the cortisol, the adrenaline running through, and our body can't keep up with absorbing it. But two, it stops all other functions. Because the stress response is so critical, or was so critical to our survival, all other functions are turned off when the stress response is turned on, which means if you're eating in a stress state, not only is your digestion hampered, but you're not really absorbing the nutrients because, again, your body stopped. It stopped doing that. Two, reproduction stops. So if you are trying to conceive and you're constantly in a high stress state, that could be impairing your ability to conceive. Metabolism stops. So this is the lot that I've been talking about lately, right? The weight loss. When we're in a constant state of stress, our body cannot lose weight because metabolism function, thyroid function stops when we're in this state of stress. Also, your ability to get a good night's sleep is hampered because when you're wound up all the time, it's really hard for your body to chill down and produce that melatonin that allows you to get a good night's sleep. So the other thing that stress can do is it can trigger diseases that we may be susceptible to, right? I have been reading so much about disease and overall health and how we can maintain our health for the long term, living a long, healthy life. And one of the things that I've seen over and over again in the books that I've been reading is that there's a certain percentage of our bodies, or a certain percentage of susceptibility to disease based on our biology, and a certain percent based on our lifestyle. And that percentage varies based on the specific disease we're talking about. But overall, it's like 20 to 30% based on our biology, and the rest of it is based on our lifestyle. So we may have a genetic predisposition to a certain disease. If we have a family trait, like a lot of people in the family have some kind of cancer, or a lot of people in the family have high blood pressure, or, heart disease, or anything, right? We could have a genetic predisposition, but our lifestyle can trigger, it's like an on or off switch, right? Our lifestyle can either turn this disease on, or it can keep it in the off mode. And I could go on off a tangent because my husband's family has preponderances to certain diseases that he has managed to turn off, fingers crossed, based on his lifestyle, but other members of his family have turned it on based on their lifestyle. But being in that high stress state can trigger these diseases to turn on. And some of those things could be, like I mentioned, cardiovascular disease and heart disease. It could be autoimmune issues. So like Crohn's disease, IBS, rheumatoid arthritis, leaky gut, endometriosis, fibromyalgia, PCOS, lupus, all of these things can be triggered on by stress. And there are so many more. That's just an example. But also stress causes us to reach for those comfort foods, right? When we're in a stress state, we tend to want super sweet or super salty things. And the stress response basically it gives us a preponderance, it doesn't make us, but it gives us a preponderance to want those things. It also can cause us to overeat because we're just kind of, what's the word? We're basically trying to fill the void in our lives. Like we're trying to calm ourselves with food because certain comfort foods do give us that nice serotonin lift. And so we're basically trying to mask our stress symptoms with food. And oftentimes then we're eating too quickly as well, which can also hamper our digestion. So Stress is bad. There's so many bad things about stress. Sleep as well. If we are not getting ourselves, if we're not giving ourselves enough sleep on a regular basis, that is another stressor on our bodies. So as adults, like 99.9% of us need at least 8 hours of sleep per night. People will say 7 to 9 hours, but really it's like if you don't get 8, because it takes you about a half, if you're getting a good night's sleep, it takes you about a half hour to fall asleep anyway. So setting yourself up to get 8 to 8.5 and getting 8 is really critical for a lot of things. And I'm going to go through those things. So what happens when we don't get that sleep? Well, for one thing, we eat more calories because lack of sleep is a stressor on our body. So going back to that last point, when you're in a stress state, you tend to reach for the comfort foods, the super sweet or the super salty. Sleep puts us in a stress state, so they go together. It also, when you don't sleep enough, you probably notice this, it reduces your ability to concentrate and therefore lowers your productivity. Now, a lot of us try to mask our sleepy symptoms with caffeine, which has a host of its own issues, especially if you're overindulging in caffeine. And I can tell you from my life, I've done that a lot. And it's kind of this, I started to realize there was no point, right? Because I would be super tired. So I'd have a bunch of coffee and then I would get a headache from all the extra caffeine, or I'd over-caffeinate and feel sluggish again, because caffeine can have the same kind of blood sugar response that sugar does, where you have a high and then you have a crashing low. So it was not helping, right? The key, of course, would have been to have gotten a good night's sleep, but sometimes I'm not so bright, so it takes me a while to learn things. But a lack of sleep also lowers your immune response, which means you're more susceptible to getting sick. And especially these days, I don't know about you, but I really don't want to get sick because there are some evil sicknesses out there that I don't want to get. So getting a good night's sleep, as you've probably noticed, right? If you've ever gone through, let's say you were in college and you were cramming for finals or what have you, and you didn't get enough sleep, you probably got a cold afterwards. I can name specific colds that I've had and tell you exactly how much sleep I got the night before, or that week. Because I know for me, I tend to get sick when I don't get enough sleep. So that's not a scientific experiment, but I can tell you there are scientific experiments that have been done, or studies that have been done, that show that when you don't get enough sleep, it does lower your immune response. And lack of sleep also increases your risk for heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, depression, and increased inflammation. So let's just get some sleep. Give yourself a good 8.5 hours. Why not? You're worth it, right? Okay, so that was point number 2. So point number 3 is, why is taking a time out so hard? Yes, thank you, Rendia. Why is it so hard for us to take time outs for ourselves? This can go really deep. I'm going to give us some examples, but no, there are so many more. Because we as women have so many responsibilities and we feel so responsible for a lot of things, right? It's almost like we have to take care of everybody and everything, and there just aren't enough hours in the day, so we tend to skimp on ourselves. So that's the first reason why it's hard for us to take a time out for ourselves, is the time. I will call it the time excuse, right? Because we all have the same amount of hours in the day, and it's just a matter of where we choose to spend that time. So when we are already tired because we haven't been giving ourselves enough sleep, when we're already stressed out, we tend to gravitate towards mindless activities, right? Like we could binge watch our favorite TV show, we can spend a bunch of time scrolling on social media, because we just don't have the bandwidth to spend, making ourselves a good dinner, or, doing something like reading something that is enlightening for us, or doing something that I guess takes more effort, right? So we do have the time. It's just, again, how we spend the time, and also setting ourselves up for wanting to be, or being able to spend that time. So the other thing about time is that self-care is actually, it gives you back time. So it's not the law of diminishing returns. It's the opposite of the law of diminishing returns, which I guess is the law of increasing returns. But when you spend time, like I was saying, in the morning doing your morning practice, like let's say you do 20 minutes of meditating, of inspirational reading, of gratitude. Remember, I was saying that actually makes you more effective and productive during the day, more efficient. And if you're getting plenty of sleep, your brain's also firing, all those synapses are firing faster, and they are working more efficiently as well. So if you're setting yourself up well for a productive day, then you will be more productive. And I find that taking that 20 minutes in the morning actually gives me way more time during the day because I'm just more creative and I'm just more able to come up with great ideas. And I'm much more patient with people and I give myself more grace. Like I'm not as hard on myself. So self-care is really the time you take out to do it, it actually gives you back so much more. And the second part about why taking time out for ourselves is so hard is that a lot of us use busyness as a shield. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like a badge of honor to be busy. And this is part of the American culture, right? Like, um, it's funny because I lived in England for a while and it was, things may be changing a little bit now, but it's almost like being busy is not a good thing. Like, if you, to be in the upper class, you actually want to not be busy. Being, have you ever watched all those like 1800s British not even dramas, but British shows like even Downton Abbey, which is in the 1900s. But it's almost like if you're in the aristocratic class, your job is to not be busy. And so people strove to not be as busy. But here in America, it's the opposite. We strive to be busy, right? And it's like a sense of importance, or like I said, a badge of honor. It can sometimes be an ego trip, like things will fall apart if I don't do it, right? Like I have to be busy at every point, otherwise things will fall apart. Well, that's not exactly true. Things won't fall apart if you don't do the laundry today. Things won't fall apart if you don't clean up after somebody today. And hey, wouldn't it be great if you actually taught that person how to clean up after themselves? But basically what I'm trying to say is your self-worth is not tied into the doing, right? You don't need to be tied into the doing to feel yourself worthy. You being is good enough. And you taking time out for yourself not only signals to you that you are worthy, but it signals to those around you that you are worthy. If you want someone else to treat you with respect, you need to respect yourself. And that goes equally with coworkers, with spouses, with children. I know that I have noticed that when I set myself up to have my morning practice, when I give myself that time, I'm not only signaling to myself that I'm worth that time, I'm signaling to my children that I'm worth that time, and I'm setting a good example for them that they are worth that time. So there's so much there, right? Here's the other thing. When we have this constant drive to stay busy, it means that we don't have to look at ourselves in the mirror, right? It means that we don't have to face whatever it is that we don't want to face because we're too busy to look at it. We're too busy to think about it. And I know for some people, that's the bit of the hesitation about meditating or spending that quiet time with oneself. I have some friends and family who will leave the TV on all the time, right? To have that constant bit of noise so they don't have to hear their own thoughts, either because they have negative self-talk going on or, sorry, nose itch. Either they have negative self-talk going on or they just don't want to hear their own thoughts because they don't think their own thoughts are valuable. But having some kind of noise, whether it's actual noise or whether it's just the noise of being constantly on the go, that is keeping us from growing and developing, right? The other thing is it could be keeping us from feeling our feelings. And this ties into overeating as well. Like a lot of us, we tend to comfort ourselves with food. That's why they call it comfort foods, right? When you comfort yourself with food, you are basically pushing down the feelings and covering them up with food. And I'll be talking about this more in my live later on my Facebook page about my own journey, right? Because we've all done it. We've all reached for the bucket of ice cream. We've all reached for the French fries or the Pringles or whatever. Like I could eat a whole thing of Pringles, people. Barbecue flavor. It had to be barbecue flavor. But I could eat the whole thing in one sitting. But covering up our feelings with the food or with the need to be busy all the time, it's the same thing, right? We're using a different tool for the same purpose, which is to not have to face our feelings. Because it's easier to ignore them than to have to deal with them, right? But then we live in this stuckedness. We live in this place of not moving forward and just kind of being mired in our own problems and not being able to live our full lives. And sometimes this us being in this state of constant busyness is because we are scared of our power. We're almost scared to know what we could do if we actually let ourselves do it. Because what would happen if we embrace self-care? What would happen if we actually gave ourselves this time in the morning or time in the evening to unwind, to almost pamper ourselves, right? Like, will we start to hear our thoughts? Will we start to realize that there are toxic influences in our lives that we need to let go of? Or will we start to realize there are habits that aren't serving us anymore? Is that what we're scared of? That we know we have this power and we don't want to listen to it. So those are some things to consider. But here's the pièce de résistance, how to actually make it happen, right? So how do we make time for self-care? Because again, so many of us feel super, super busy. Well, as I said earlier, it's a matter of where we spend our time. So for me, I schedule it in. I block it off on my calendar. And I don't know, when I start to talk, my nose itches. I don't know, it's a thing. But if we schedule it in, if we block off that time so that no one has access to us during the time that we've decided we want to have this time to ourselves, and we hold it as sacred, just as important as any other appointment, that makes it more likely to happen, right? Like if you schedule a doctor appointment, if you schedule a workout, if you schedule anything that you schedule, like if you're putting it in either your physical calendar or your e-calendar, typically when something is scheduled, you make sure it happens, right? Self-care is the same. I have a certain routine that I like to follow, and routines are really good because, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I have a certain routine that I follow. It's scheduled. People know they can't get a hold of me during that time. I put my phone on do not disturb, so they literally cannot get a hold of me, and I'm not distracted by the pings and the dings from my phone. So that's the first step. Schedule it in and put your phone on do not disturb. The second thing a lot of women deal with is guilt. Guilt about leaving, the family or the kids with the husband, or leaving, an event or whatever it is, just like the guilt of taking time out for ourselves. So one thing that I've noticed is that my husband will often tell me when I need to take time out, right? Like he's noticed now that we've been married a good 16 years, I think, 16. And he's noticed now, he's like, you need to get outside. Like, because I had been really secluded during this whole COVID thing. He's like, you need to go to do something you like to do. Yes, Rendia, scheduling is so important. And so he was prompting me to do stuff. And it's almost like I needed permission. Hello, people. I do this for a living. Yet I needed my husband to give me permission to go, do something that I enjoy, to get out of the house to do something. Because between COVID and the fires, it's just been challenging, right? To find like the normal things that I would do aren't available to me. So, but getting the buy-in of the people in your life is super, super critical. And I like to phrase it like this. Like, let's say you're having a conversation with a spouse about, hey, I'm going to take some time to do X, Y, and Z in whatever time that is. Explaining to your spouse why you're wanting to take this time. The why being, I will sleep better. I'll be more calm. I will be more patient. I will feel better about myself. And this all translates to how it's good for me and how it's good for you. And, if you're with a spouse who loves you, of course, he or she is going to be, I would think he or she would be very receptive to that, to knowing that you need that time for yourself, and to quote unquote allowing you to take it, right? You're a grown up, you can take whatever time you want. But of course, it's a partnership and you want to make sure that you have that person's buy-in. But think of it this way. How many of us have husbands that would ask us permission to sit on the couch for 3 hours on a Sunday and watch a game? Anyone? Anyone have a spouse who would ask them permission to sit on the couch for 3 hours on a Sunday and watch a sporting event? Probably none of us, because they just do it. They know that they need to take that time for themselves, or they want to take that time for themselves. They don't need to ask permission. So why do we as women feel like we need to ask permission? Okay. If you do need permission, I am granting you permission, and you can tell your spouse, Claudine said so. Okay. I am the same. I listen to someone else rather than myself. I know, Rendia, we all do it, right? We all do it. So Rendia, I'm giving you permission. So, and this is critical, right? Prioritizing ourselves. Remind yourself how important this time is for your physical and mental well-being. Think of it this way. If you had a medical appointment, like let's say you had a chemo appointment or you had dialysis or something like that. If you had that appointment, you knew that you needed you needed to go to that appointment for your physical well-being, you would go, right? This is the same thing. Self-care is not only required for your physical well-being, but it's also a requirement for your mental well-being, which affects every system in your body. Our mental state affects every system in our bodies. And if we don't take care of our mental state, then everything else starts to fall apart. As I mentioned in some of the things I said earlier. So prioritizing yourself and reminding yourself how critical it is for you to make this time for yourself. Okay, here's the other thing. Everything's hard at first, right? It's hard to start a new habit. And a lot of us give up too soon. But to create a habit, it actually takes 66 days. I know that there's that popular book that says it takes 28 days to build a habit. Studies have shown, the research has shown, it actually takes 66 days to build a habit. So once you've done something for 66 days, it just becomes part of your routine. And once it becomes part of your routine, there's no guilt. There's no, people aren't expecting to see you at a certain time. Like everyone's basically used to it at that point. You're used to it. They're used to it. You've created this new routine, this new process in your life. And it's great for you and it's great for everyone else. And it's just like part of what you do, right? Kind of like, I don't even know how many years it's been. Maybe it's been like 5 years. I go to Tuesday night yoga. Well, now I'm doing it online, but Tuesday night yoga is my thing. So everybody in my family knows Tuesday nights, not to expect me around. I am at yoga or I'm in the office with the door closed doing yoga because it's part of my routine. Making your self-care part of your routine is just as critical. And this is the key, right? Creating new routines to replace the old ones. And I've talked about this a little bit before in other contexts, but essentially it's a replacement thing. Like if you think about it in terms of food, if I tell you you can't have ice cream, all you're going to think about is the ice cream, right? But if I say, here, have this healthier ice cream or this clean eating ice cream that tastes amazing that you're not going to know the difference, but it's so much better for you, then you're like, sweet, I just replace the bad ice cream with the good ice cream. It's the same thing with your routines, replacing the routines that aren't serving you with routines that do serve you, right? And don't let yourself get sucked back into the old habits. Again, it takes 66 days. So give yourself a break too if you falter a little bit. But it's important to replace, because if you have a void, you'll find a way to fill the void, right? Like let's say you have an extra hour and you're so used to, cleaning up after somebody or, finding laundry to do or whatever it happens to be. If you have an extra hour, plan something for yourself in that hour that serves you. Basically have a self-care wish list of things that you would like to do and implement those. Now, not only just implement them, quote unquote, when you have extra time, but also plan time for them, right? But if you have an ongoing wish list, then you always have something to incorporate if and when you have an extra few minutes, hour, whatever it may be. Now, here's the other thing. If you are not taking some time for yourself on a Sunday afternoon, you could go crazy and take the whole Sunday, right? Have at it. A lot of people do. But let's say you're not good at taking a whole Sunday. Let's do some baby steps. You could take 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon all to yourself. Do whatever you want. Get a pedicure, read a book, go for a walk, do some gardening, some yoga, whatever you want to do, take that time. Because I am here to tell you, no one's going to miss you for 2 hours on a Sunday. Like, yes, you may need to coordinate with your spouse to take care of kids if you have kids. But for the most part, no one's calling you on a Sunday afternoon. Like you don't need work stuff done Sunday afternoon. Like this is going to sound a little mean, but I'm going to say it anyway. You're not so important that somebody needs you 24/7, especially on a Sunday, right? Like none of us are running the country, right? As far as I know. But Sunday afternoons, you can definitely take 2 hours to yourself. So I hope that was useful, ladies. Please let me know, again, if you are watching this on the replay, put hashtag replay. If you have any additional questions that you may think of later, please let me know. Let me just say this. You are worth it. You are worthy. You deserve to take the time for yourself to regroup, to reset, to rejuvenate. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye.